I always like to say thank you for taking your time out, investing into yourself. You guys could be anywhere in the world, but you decided to invest in yourself and to tune into today's webinar. I want to put my disclaimer here before I get started. This disclaimer protects the legal liability of myself and the integrity of this program. I want to clearly state that I am not an attorney or act as an attorney. Any information material shared with you in this video is to offer you guidance and is for educational purposes only. In no way do we promote fraud, deceit, or offensive content. I shall not be held liable for any conduct or any content for any party viewing this video for any decisions made based on such information. So this particular topic is going to talk about different types of trust structure, estate protection, probate avoidance, and death of contracts. So we've been talking about different types of process when it comes to the structure of the trust. Maybe you have a trust-owned LLC, a trust-owned life insurance policy, trust-owned bank account, trust-owned property, land, you name it. You want to make sure that you protect the estate from having wealth inside the estate. You want to avoid probate in all its totality, because again, it's going to start tapping into your assets, your funds. These court systems have the rights to take over if you don't have control. So we want to make sure that you guys have the understanding about having control. Why you have the activity of your limbs and, your right sound mind. So conservatorship is a court-appointed position where the legal guardianship has pretty much have completely control over your finances or determine on what you can do. Sometimes in these situations where you have child stars, you may have some children, like sometimes your child may go viral on social media, TikTok, YouTube, you name it. So it's pretty, for you guys to be in this program, it's important for you guys to know about having a trust in place first, putting your children inside the trust, because it is a family trust. It's not like you can't protect your children with this trust. This is two different stories, but these two stories kind of similar, where Britney Spears became a childhood pop star really, really fast. She blew up the charts. She was making a lot of money, but she was young. So that means she didn't have a sound mind. She was a minor. So her father actually took over conservatorship. But in that process, as him taking over conservatorship, he actually had over her finances, control over her finances. Unfortunately, in her situation, it kind of got ugly because he was taking her money. And that would kind of brought me in for this football player. His name is Michael. I want to say his last name is pronounced Ohar, but Michael. This particular story was very sad because he thought that he was adopted, but no, what happened was this two couple, they actually signed a conservatorship and was taking finances from him. So in some cases, the legal guardianship, when they have control over the persons who've been determined unable to take care of themselves and their finances. This young man, I guess he was going through some type of homelessness. They took him in, kind of, helped him in things of that nature. In some cases, you may either sign over authority, and that's what happened with him. He trusted these people to care for him, to have the right, knowledge over the finances and things like that. And he actually was baited into, signing over his rights where he didn't know his rights. And, I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have none. Now they have no control over their royalties, contracts, anything that happens. And like I said, sometimes family is the ones that take over your finances. Now, when you get of age and you kind of find out, okay, I am in a position to kind of take care of my money. Now, I don't know about Britney Spears because she's been going through some medical things and some drug or some allegedly, I always put that out there, but she's been trying to get herself together and things of that nature. But it is a long drawn out court battle. So if you guys don't have no protection for your children, you don't know what may happen. Your children may want to start a business. They may go viral, things like that. So you want to have these things in place to protect your children. A lot of people ask, well, what can I do to protect my children? Your children want to start something. Your children may go into contracts, sports and things like that. You can always put the trust in that place to have ownership and have control. Guardianship. Now, I know sometimes we hear these words, guardianship, conservatorship. It sounds as though it's only talking about a child. It's not only related to children. Wendy Williams actually went through this. Wendy Williams was actually in the center of a court battle, a really nasty court battle, cases where her bank froze her assets. Now, this is not the courts, the bank froze it. She was banking with Wells Fargo at the time, and they was claiming that she may be in need of some guardianship over her own finances because they were concerned about her overall well-being. So the court appointed an attorney to handle her estate. Now, when you hear typically about estates, you kind of hear estates when someone passed away. But when someone becomes ill or incompetent or medically not in their right mind, then the courts can come in now and still take over and control who gets what. So this particular attorney was hired to decide who gets what over Wendy Williams' hard-earned money. Now, I know that could be tough because she's saying, like, ain't nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. I can take care of my money. And she's then trying to protect her wealth. Then she's trying to have control and power when it's already too late. Even though she, even though after everything she does gets to approve it by the guardianship, it's up to them. Whether they say, if you want to buy something, they're going to say if they deny it or approve. So it's kind of hard to be in that position when you're making all this money and you got to go and ask an Adele or go and ask an attorney like, hey, approve this. I want to get this stuff. And they may say yes or no. Even though Wendy Williams allegedly granted her son, Kevin Jr., power of attorney. Power of attorney is only in position depending on what type. If it's dual, if it's general power attorney or medical power attorney, it's only good when that person is living. So if he's not in position to be a successor trustee, we talked about not putting your kids as beneficiaries, putting your kids in position to have control and manage their wealth. It seems as though he's not in that position. He's kind of like on the back end. So God forbid something happens to her, what will happen to her son in the position where she don't have control of the wealth, which means he won't have control of the wealth. So you want to make sure before someone has a medical scare, someone has, some type of issue where they may say you're not in a sound mind to cover your funds, transfer all the wealth to the trust. Make sure that your loved one, someone that that will benefit off of all the things that you did in your lifetime. Because look at Wendy Williams, her show has been canceled in 2022. It seems as though everything was stripped away from her because one, she didn't have the knowledge or what she should do to have things put in place. And she feels as though she is in a sound mind to at least cover her finances, but they took that right away from her. So again, these people have a lot of money. They around, legal representatives, but it's still important for you to even have the knowledge to advocate for yourself. Here's Bruce Willis. Now, Bruce Willis is like one of my favorites, y'all. I don't know if y'all seen the movie Sixth Sense, but Bruce Willis has been a sensation when it comes into the acting world. And it's just like, he went through this whole medical situation, having strokes, allegedly having these types of strokes. But now 2022 has diagnosed him with Alzheimer's, early stage of Alzheimer's. So now when it's progressing, they're now going to be taking away some of his movie and all these things, like all the credits and things that he has no control over it. So when he's going through incapacity planning, that's just basically saying, I need to plan something before I'm 100%, in dementia. I need to plan something, and you're at your last kind of like moments, kind of like not in a sound mind. You got people kind of in your ear telling you what to do, trying to tell you what to do, and you don't know because now it's at this last minute. But now he has an attorney, he has, legal authority to act on his behalf. Again, not having control of all the wealth that he's built. It's important to have a trust in place prior to medical diagnosis. I know that we get life insurance policies for death benefits. It is important to get life insurance policies while you're living, to have living benefits. So if your income change, your income, shift, and now it's considered incapacitated, or you are on bed rest, or maybe you're just going through something and you need to have access to money to keep your bills afloat, you can still take and borrow from your life insurance policy if you plan ahead, okay? So these are all just scenarios surrounding why a trust is important to have in place. Even when we're looking at Prince passed away, not having a will in place. He went through a 6-year, well, not him, his family went through a 6-year battle. When you don't have a trust in place, even if you had a will and you have probate involved, courts get involved, they went through a 156 million estate. But guess what? It was split between legal entities. When we talk about contracts and when we talk about in your music industry, when you're controlled by labels, when you're controlled by different contracts, the good thing about Prince, he had his own labels or his own companies, entities over his royalties, but he's still connected to some type of label where they're now going to start releasing through his estate. The good thing is his family members were able to settle and go through. The entities are now paying the family. So it don't look like the family getting it directly to them. And this is a form of protection. We talk about having barriers, having layers of protection, as far as having an LLC as a entity, having an LLC or an entity as like a trustee, or in this situation is considered an executor. So when we talk about having your estate as beneficiaries, a lot of people saying, well, how do you open the estate? Who's going to control the estate? Who's going to own the estate? Looking at this, the entities Prince Legacy LLC and Prince Oates Holding LLC is the owner of his estate, and the money got distributed through the entities down to his heirs. Okay, so it's important. So he passed away in 2016 without a will, leaving it to his heirs, which was a battle for 6 years. Now they reached the settlement, which was the 156 million, but I think the courts took a lot. So let's get into this really quickly. Let's just show you in real time. You don't want your family fighting and battling because you may left some assets out. This is why it's important to not only you have a trust, but your family members should know about how to handle manage the wealth in the trust. Now, according to the copy of courts, it says here the judicial has ordered Prince estate split by the two entities, right? So don't necessarily have to go to people. I get that a lot, saying accent. You don't need to put people as beneficiaries or people as executors or controllers. You can protect the people that will receive the wealth. So the estate was split evenly through those two companies. And then here, his half siblings receive the wealth. So this is a good way where they're not really kind of getting taxes hit directly to them. One thing about Prince, he owned his music publishing company, but it was also through a Primary Wave. Now, Primary Wave became a big company through a lot of these artists. Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson. This company is all tied in with contracts. So guess what? A lot of these companies get paid out through their estate if they don't have the trust protecting the entire estate. Taxes, a lot of things get taken out the estate. So it's very important when I say trust own everything, it is trust own everything, even a trust owned entity. So even though the entity is there to receive the wealth, the entity can receive the wealth, but as long as the entity is trust owned. Charitable trust donation versus a nonprofit. So Vanessa Bryant, which is late Kobe Bryant's wife, she went through a settlement. I get questions asked in reference to if we go through a settlement, maybe it's a lottery, maybe it's an accident, maybe it's, some type of wealth that's going to be, given to you. You don't have to accept it in your name. Here's an example. Vanessa Bryant, she donated a $16 million settlement to the Mamba and Mambacita Sports Foundation. Now, what I love about this story is that the Mambacita and Mamba Sports Foundation is a part of their family. So even though she donated the whole $16 million settlement, it doesn't mean that her family don't get to dictate and control. Now, the charitable trust donations, charities operate solely for charitable purposes and foundations. So let's say you guys don't have any children. Maybe you're not married. Maybe you are connected to like a religious organization and you say, you know what, I can't, when I pass away, I cannot take it with me. But instead of you leaving it to children, you don't have any children, you can make a charitable donation. So all the assets that you're leaving behind, you have your trust, but you can also make a donation. So that's another way through making a charitable donation from your assets from your trust, which is also a tax benefit. So a charitable trust is a trust which establish and distribute assets to a charity. Now, a charitable remainder trust distributes assets and distributes any remaining assets to charity. An irrevocable charitable trust is not sold or liquidated. Therefore, there's no tax that need to be due. So you want to make sure that when you're doing donations, it is a gift, or again, it's a nonprofit donation. And that's very good to use those terminologies so you won't have no tax implications. James Brown. Now, when James Brown passed away, he left most of his assets, which was $100 million estate, in a charitable trust. What I like about this, because he didn't just leave it to family, he actually left it to an organization. So they funded scholarships for disadvantaged children, but the estate became a mere litigation. When you have assets and you also have debt and it get tied up in court, that's what happened. Even though he had a charitable trust, you guys, you got to make sure that there is an irrevocable clause that is inside the trust. Because it took 15 years, there was more than a dozen lawsuits that kept hitting his estate, kept trying to sue the assets and the things that he had left behind. When they went through the process, when they did up to 15 years, 5 million or more than 100 million, 5 million to more than 100 million, that's what he kind of like dissolved. 90 million was left. They kind of took a lot of his money and wealth due to debt. So it's important that you protect the asset. When I mean protect the asset, that means all wealth should be in the trust. And if you do things like personal guarantee, have credit cards, have different type of loans and things like that, keep it in your natural name and not in the trust name or the entity name itself. All right. So his music royalties and his fund educational expenses, they went to the children in South Carolina and Georgia. So this charitable trust, it was specifically written out that his wealth, even though he was leaving 100 million through all the court battle, at least the children still at least got 90 million to his organization. All right, so I hope you guys are picking up what I'm dropping and why this is so important, because the estate is benefiting every time. Every time somebody passed away, if you notice in each storyline that I have been talking about, whether they're living or deceased, and the estate is a part of everything that we do, from the wealth that we make, the decisions we make, from the assets that we have, the jobs that we have. That's why I always say, you're connected with human resources. If you have pension, if you have, 401ks, anything that's connected to you, you want to start reshifting things, right? Because it's all going to go to your estate. And that's why we put the estate as the beneficiary, because the estate always benefit. Okay. So the estate has retained the entertainment attorney, Ron Sweeney. Ron Sweeney and his company, which was over handling DMX estate. I know his name is Earl. I think his name is Earl Jones or Earl Williams. I'm sorry. I don't know. I just know him as DMX, you guys. But his estate attorney, Earl Simmons. Look, it's right here in my face. Earl Simmons, his estate, his sons is the administrators and his ex-wife. But the thing is, the attorneys are over this estate. His children is not in full control. Administrators are not controlled. They just oversee it. This is a battle for control. Even though he has, I think, about 15 to 16 children, you guys, the reason why it's important to even if you feel as though it's only $50,000, you still want to make sure that your children have the full control. The reason why he don't have a lot of money there is because he had a lot of debt. I think before he passed away, he was actually battling a tax evasion case. Okay. He was actually going to pay it. He wasn't running away from his affairs. He just didn't have the knowledge. According to some of the statements and articles, that DMX was like, don't pay it, nothing in my name. He kind of had the concept, but he didn't have the right information. He was like, look, don't pay it in my name, pay it through something else, pay me in cash. That's how he was, pay me in cash. And this is how he got caught up with not paying taxes. But when it came to his death, unfortunately, when he passed away in debt. So now he sold over 74 million records, but his estate is less than $50,000. So that means a lot of contracts has control over where that money is going. If you play that song, any of his famous songs, his family is not getting the benefit. When he passed away, everybody was playing all his music. That means streaming. Money is being made. Money is being made. Guess what happens where the money goes? The money goes directly to the estate. And that's why I talk about, you want to make sure that the trust is the one to open the estate, and then your trustees are to handle whatever in there, because all the money that's going to his estate is getting tied up. And guess who's getting a big fat paycheck? The attorneys the whole time. As long as this estate continues to operate, courts are getting paid, probate fees, all the attorneys getting paid, and the family is just sitting behind waiting. And again, it's getting depleted lower and lower and lower, because they don't have no type of protection. And then if you don't have no protection while you're living, you're not going to have no protection when a person passes away. If they don't open the estate, you can come back and open the estate and put the trust over the estate. So it is important that we at least understand that if you have some family members that passed away and there's a statute of limitation on the estate, if it's still eligible for you to go and open the estate, open your family's estate and put the rest of the remainder in a trust. The only unfortunate part is that you take on their debts too. That's the only unfortunate part. Chadwick Boseman was a very sad story that I started looking into. I wanted to know why. Right? I had a lot of questions when it came to this because, again, he was one of the biggest melanated actors in the industry. The movie Black Panther alone made way over $2.3 million. But again, you don't know someone's mindset, right? Someone get a diagnosis or a cancer scare, and they're not thinking about, I'm just going to get a trust. I'm going to get a will. I'm going to set it up. Sometimes people are just thinking about, I just want to live my life. I want to live the rest of my days. I hear sometimes a lot of people, either trustees or potential clients that say, my family members just won't listen. They not trying to change their ways. They're just trying to they're just going to leave whatever is left behind. And sometimes when people are fighting for their life, the last thing they want to think about is who get a car, who get a bank account. And in his 2-year battle, unfortunately, $900,000 of it went to probate, right? It was a $900 probate bond. Finally, finally have an idea on how his assets will be distributed through their surviving heirs. The good thing is his wife, she voluntarily said she was split with his parents. Okay, the wife didn't have to do that. They in California, so California do have a 50-50 split, and she didn't have to, but because they didn't have a will or didn't have a trust in place, she split it with the parents. Most of the times it gets split with the state. So it's important that, even if you're in the California area or any other surrounding area, if your assets are not protected or your estate is not protected, you're looking at your family now getting sharing it with the state, okay, versus your family. So they inherited $1.15 million of his estate, valued at $2.3 million, which we know it was more than that. It was way more than that, but we don't know how many times people are locked into contracts and are borrowing, budgets on films. And, even though there's royalties, the sad thing about when it comes to royalties, if you play Black Panther over and over and over again, yes, that's money still being made, but guess what happens? The family settled the estate. And the pain in settling the estate is that you're just taking what you can today, and you can't come back and bring up, oh, wait, somebody's making more money off his name. They did another movie. Even though they had him as a memory, he still technically played in the movie, which someone got paid for it. So what happens? There's a contract. Contracts are perpetual. So when there's a contract signed, whether he live or die, the company is still going to eat off of this person that's no longer living. So when you guys have family members, or if I'm not saying it's in the industry, I know I'm talking more like celebrities and things like that, but you may have contracts that's like, you sign this, like the military has ways where they are going to take care of you while you live, and they're going to give you housing, they're going to give you benefits. You're under the guardianship of the government in that moment. So when that person passed away, that's why they get those big funerals with the guns, the officers, and things like that, because you're technically under an insurance policy that is being paid out. So now when it comes to Aretha Franklin, this one right here blew my mind, because again, sometimes we think, we need a legal counsel, we need an attorney to set up our affairs. We don't know nothing. We can't do it without an attorney. Even though you guys invested in yourself to learn this information on your own, you can draw it up on your own. This woman, this icon, right? Pioneer, she wrote out a will on a piece of paper, y'all. A piece of paper. It was chicken scratch. If you kind of see a little example, it was in the middle of a couch. 4 years later, and the courts accepted it. I say this to say, even though you have a trust in place and you may have some other assets, you may have some other statements you want to make, this is something that is private, a family secret code. It doesn't matter. If it was something like an antique and you say, I want this particular person to get this, you can add additional paperwork to the trust. You can add written out things for personal assets, for personal things, for maybe some pearls. I had someone had a request to say, put some ashes in the urn and make sure it's on my chest when you put me in the grave. So you get different types of requests, and you want to make sure that it's not about money. It's not about the physical assets. We're talking about intangible and tangible assets, right? So Aretha Franklin died in 2018. Her family believes she had no will, but months later in May 2019, 2 handwritten documents were found at her home. It's been a long 5 years and for her family and her children. Now, here's the thing. 5 long years. There was excessive court fees, court battles. They want to settle. And when they settled, see, the courts took and agreed to accept this handwritten will, because within 5 years, guess who's not getting paid? The IRS not getting paid. The company's not getting money released from the estate. You need the family to open the estate in order for other companies to start getting paid. Remember, I told you guys that death is a big business. And when death becomes a big business, sometimes they need other people like family members to pass on a death certificate. Right? They need to pass on the death certificate. They need to make sure this is who they're using, family members, to settle. Now her royalties are up in limbo because family settled. All the families worrying about, oh, I get this house, I get this car, I get this money. But there is royalties and residual income that was probably going to pay for the next 30, 40 years. But this is why the statistics are so high when it says wealth don't make it past the second generation. If you look at a lot of these stories that I've been just talking about thus far, all the wealth is getting distributed to people. Family taking it out and they just going ahead dissolving it and settling. When it comes to a trust and it comes to having assets inside of a trust, you want to pass the trust to the next generation. You don't want to have any assets come out and go to John Doe and come out and go to Jane Doe. This is how you're keeping the wealth in the family. When you have royalties, that's going to be paying forever and ever. And then it doesn't matter if the person is young. Young Dolph was under 30 and Takeoff was 33. You don't know when it's going to be your last day. So having these assets in place is so important to protect them now. When you're going into contracts, when you say, because Young Dolph has a very, very great story, by the way. I looked into his background and we were still looking at those houses. Unfortunately, his family is actually going through a battle of 100 foreclosed homes that he had purchased through LLCs, but he wasn't the only owner or the only part of the other party of a deal. So it looks like the other party that was helping him get these houses are trying to take those houses from his children. And it's hard to, fight with something like that if there's nothing in writing, because the other party don't have a voice, right? So now other family members going to have to take the other party to court to try to make sure that they save those 100 houses that he initially purchased for his children. He also did a lot of philanthropy work, and he owned his master. He owned his label. He had his own private record company. But the sad thing is, when it comes to a family member settling the estate, when they continue to play that song, you have to keep the estate operating. Don't settle the estate, just manage the estate. That's why the trust is the beneficiary, because even though the beneficiary is going to benefit, you still have successor trustees that's going to manage whatever wealth that's going into the estate. Hopefully you guys are picking up what I'm dropping. The thing why I have Takeoff in here is because he was the breadwinner of his entire family, but he didn't have a close relationship with his father. His mother predominantly raised him. Now, when you're dealing with two surviving parents, when there's a young child that passes away, and sometimes in certain situations, you get paid out by the government, you get paid out by the state. Sometimes there's a settlement with the county, the state, depending on how this young person passed away. Even though they're not married, even though his parents not married, they're still the surviving heirs that will legally, technically get half of, or they'll get equal shares to control his estate. What's being affected between his parents and the companies that he signed to is that he's still locked in contracts. And even though a contract is considered breach, let's say he was on a contract and say, you have to provide 10 albums for me. Well, he was, unfortunately killed in a crossfire. But what if he only did 7 albums, which means he passed away in debt because he breached the contract. So even though he's not making more albums, whatever he's getting paid from, he's now paying the debt of that breach of contract, if that makes any sense. So when it comes to like these artist names, they still have to understand that they are entities, they are a brand. This is why people ask me, why did you turn your first name, last name into an entity? Because you want to move in business as a business. And even though we've been talking about this through the beginning of the trusteeship enrichment program all the way to now, that you are a business. Either you're going to be subjected to be business to another entity, or you could come to the table and be a partnership in doing exchange, a business as a business. When it comes to the death, and I'm going to close here, because when it comes to death of individuals, we go through this process of grieving. We don't be in our right minds. We have family members are fighting over things because they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the information. Most of the times it turns into GoFundMes, it turns into attorneys have to get involved to get access of someone else's bank account. When you are moving everything, I get asked questions, hey, should I keep at least one bank account? Should I keep this private bank account and move? Just think of it. Anything that is attached to your name will immediately get frozen and sent to the estate. If you don't have no asset protection to protect all the assets and the wealth, it will be distributed against the companies that have access to your death certificate, okay? Those death certificates give the other companies leverage to continue to do business or to get paid out through an insurance claim. That is their way out of getting paid. Also, when you are having, going through the funeral arrangements and the companies ask you, say, hey, how many death certificates you need? You can take the death certificates, but when you are trying to give information to another company, always ask, what is the purpose and what is the meaning of them needing that information? Most deaths are public record, but if you're not giving them information to take out the estate, then they're not going to get it from you. They would have to go through another legal proceeding, which is a court process of filing a claim on the estate. This is how estates end up in court. This is how deceased individuals' social security number get ran, continuously sold and used. And sometimes it's turned into like a CPN or something like that. It's turned into like a CPN. There's no protection over that person's name. And that means it leaves them at risk for the family to say, how is this assets are now people getting things in this person's name and that person passed away years ago. So even putting the trust over the estate to only open the estate, to take out assets, to manage, to maneuver, the trust don't pay debt, right? You're only going to maneuver and manage the wealth that is going to be hitting the estate. So hopefully this brings clarity as to why before medical condition, before you get of age, before you start signing your elders inside of the nursing homes. Most of the time when they're trying to sign your loved one in the nursing homes, they want to know, what are you bringing to the table? They want to know what house you own, what bank account do you have, because they're going to take that in exchange of your death. Everything is business, okay? So until we realize that our existence here is an exchange of commerce, services, or goods, we need to operate in society as a business, but also as an asset protected business. Thank you for watching.